So the first thing we want to do in this course is essentially to set up the registration process so you can register a user. So first and foremost, inside the navigation here, I'm going to go in here and add two different links. So where we have our link for the drop-down, we are just going to go ahead and make sure we have some login and register links as well. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure we close this drop down here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to go ahead and create two different links here using the xnav link. I am going to go into the login page here. And we're also going to make sure we have to register. Now there's a few components that Jetstream already comes with, and it's also existing within Laravel MaryUI. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and delete some of these components, such as the input component here. We don't need that because that's already in there. We don't need the welcome component. And I also don't think we need the drop-down components because those are also part of it there. We're going to be looking at the drop-down component just a bit later on. So what we want to do now is go into our auth directory, into our login and register. So we don't need the label anymore because what you can do with MaryUI is you can just say label email / username. We're going to allow the user to log in with either username or email. And same thing in here, we can just say label password. And for the register page, we want to do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these labels. And I'm going to go ahead and say name, email, password, and we're just going to call this confirm password. Outside of that, we just want to quickly create one for the username here. So with that done, let's go ahead and click on the register page. You now see we have this label here. It's all working out fine. The problem right now we will experience if you go ahead and try to register users that the username will not work. So let's see what happens then. And I'm just going to go ahead and add in a random email. And this will fail as well because it needs to be, first and foremost, we need to delete the button in here because that's not needed anymore. And outside of that, we want to basically go into our register page again and make sure we use a type of submit. So this shouldn't have gone ahead and worked yet because we can't register a user before we have essentially allowed the user to register, which we need to customize. So if I go ahead and click anything here, you will see this gives an error, and that's because we have not passed in a username because we haven't customized the flow. So there's two things we need to do here. First and foremost, we want to go to the user model. And in here, we want to make sure we have username. Then let's go back to the create users table. Make sure we have the banner image as well and the create channel description as well, because those two also needs to be fillable, which we're going to be using later on. So inside 45, we can create customize to create a new user class. And in here, we can go ahead and say username. So we're going to validate the username here. We're going to make it unique to the users, just like we do with the email. And we're also going to make it a max of 255 and a string. And the same in here, when we're creating the user, we also want to make sure that we are using a username. So if I go ahead now and then try to just create one here, you'll see that it should work now. The reason why this isn't working is because it's trying to generate a welcome view. So let's find out where that is going wrong. So this error is happening because the dashboard page doesn't have the welcome component anymore, and we don't want that. So that's where the error happens. Now we want to hide these two links for logged in users. So let's go ahead and do that now. In here, we want to make sure that this is only for guests who can see that. And now we're getting an error unable to locate Dropdown link. And that's because if you look at MaryUI and go to the Dropdown, you will notice that we have this X menu item instead of a Dropdown link. So what we want to go ahead now and do is actually just go in wherever there is a Dropdown link. We want to just go ahead and replace these. I am going to go ahead and delete the Teams one again because we really don't need that. So no reason to work on that. Just makes the file longer. So I'm going to go ahead in here and just use an X menu item. And in here we can also specify the label or the title. And we can also specify what happens when you click on it or all those sort of areas. But we can also specify, because what essentially happens here is it extending the menu. You can see we can actually provide a link. So instead of calling this HEIF, we're going to call this link. For all of the ones that's called menu item. I'm going to delete this block here because we don't want that anymore. And it may actually be easier as well if we just go inside and remove the whole menu and then we start from scratch. So I'm going to delete this now. And then here I'll just show you an example of how we can build this. So we're going to create an X drop down. And in here we want to have an X slot trigger where we're basically going to put in the username in that. So we want to have a flex in here that census the items and have a margin left of 5. And this will probably fail now because with uploading image photos, we want to go into JetStream. And in here, we want to enable profile pictures, which is perfect. So now this works. All right, so with that sorted, let's go ahead and make sure we have the relevant links. So for now, all we really need is the account settings and the logout function. So if I click this now, you can see we have these two here. I've gone ahead and already add the links here and the code just to save you some time with typing it out. And then outside of that, what we really want to do for this is we want to go into our update user information page. We want to create a username here. And we also want to have the same validation rule here because it's treated as a unique one. We want to force fill the username and then outside of that, what we want to do is inside this page called profile, there's an update profile information page here where we can go ahead and copy the works in here and also make sure that we fix the errors in here. So we want to put in a label of name instead, a label of email. I'm going to go ahead and create the username now. And with that sorted, we just want to go ahead and repeat the same thing for the update password form where we have this issue as well. Call this current password. And confirm password. And outside that, there may be a few areas in here where we also want to make sure we get rid of the label here, for example. Just want to call this code. And we want to make sure this has a type of submit. And if we look at the MaryUI configuration here, you can see in the form components, which we can create as well, we could actually customize it here. I'm not going to go ahead and do that in this video so it doesn't get too long, but that would essentially allow us to customize this a bit more toward MaryUI. So just want to make sure we add in the type of submit. And let's go ahead and see what happens in our account settings. So you have this username here. So what if we want to go ahead and update it now? And refresh, and it's all updated. Perfect. So we now have the ability to edit the username, to log in and register the user. The only other thing I want to do now is I want to go ahead into the auth service provider. No, sorry, not the auth service provider, but the Fortify service provider. And in here, I want to make sure we change some code in here for when we are authenticating. So Fortify, authenticate using, we want to pass through a closure here. And it takes through a login request as a request. And then here we just want to make sure we have where a user equals to user, where email is request identity, or where username is request identity. And then we want to grab the first one. So I'm just going to put this into a new line to make it look a bit cleaner. And then we just want to say if user and hash, and we just want to check whether the request password is the same as user password. And if that's the case, we just want to return user. That should allow us to log in with the username. Only other thing we want to change is in the fortify.php file is we want to rename these two to identity. And then inside the login.blade.php file, we want to make sure that we have this one named as identity. So we also want to make sure this is a type of text, because now it can be a username. Let's log out and see if this works with the username. And you will see it doesn't work because we haven't added this submit in here. And let's just double check that the username is the correct detail here. So it's okay, so this currently is failing. So let's just quickly check some stuff in here first. Just making sure we haven't made any spelling errors. We also want to change the home to home later on instead of having it as the dashboard, but we will do that later. So inside our Fortify service provider, let's just double check we're using the right code here and we didn't import the wrong class. So I'm going to try again and see if this worked. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and try with the email address and see if that works. Yeah, okay, so it's working with the email address. Currently where it is failing is with the username. So let's just double check why that may be. Let's change this to a lowercase username. Okay, so it's not because it's case sensitive, but the error is happening because we haven't customized this properly. So we just need to make sure that we're checking where the username is, where the request password, returning the user. Inside Fortify, we're using the username and the identity. So I'm gonna just go ahead and check if this helps out, making sure that it still returns to the dashboard. And there we go. So I think the issue was in the configuration file where we have made some spelling errors. So that should be all for this video. Thank you very much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.